Hi, everybody. My name's Dan Wells. I write horror, fantasy, and science fiction, and I talk about games on the internet. Today I'm going to talk about Legend of the Five Rings, which is a wonderful fantasy horror adventure RPG based on Japanese rather than European medieval mythology. It's really cool. I love it. This is the 5th edition of it, and I've reviewed several of their other books. The one today that we're looking at is the Adventure Supplement Mask of the Oni. This was released in conjunction with the Shadowlands setting book. So if you want an adventure that deals with the Shadowlands and goes into them and explores them, then here's the adventure for you. The Shadowlands is kind of the south part of Rokugan. Rokugan's the big kingdom where all the samurai live, and then the southern part, there's this big wall called the Caillou Wall that the Crab Clan has built to keep out the demons in the Shadowlands. And in the center of the Shadowlands, there is this what's called the Pit of Fulang, which is actually a literal pit punched through the mortal world down into the demon realm. Hell, but they don't call it hell. So this story doesn't deal with the pit, but it does deal with the characters having to cross that wall and go out into the Shadowlands and do some stuff. Now, I was initially pretty worried about this adventure because A, the Shadowlands are difficult to use, and it is very common for a lot of game masters to make the Shadowlands so inherently corrupting that the characters just never go there because they know they're never going to win and they're only going to be, tainted by evil, and then they're going to come back or they'll either die or they will come back horrifically disfigured and scarred and socially outcast for the rest of their lives. And you can do that if you want. And this adventure actually does include some advice on how to deal with tainted characters. And their main point of advice is talk to the player first. Because if you are going to taint a character, if you're going to have this kind of corruption, it kind of really needs to be done voluntarily as part of a larger character arc. I mean, clearly there's always a situation where if your characters know what they're getting into and they're willing to face the possibility of corruption in order to do what they know is right, then yes, I suppose you could just have that hit them. But because taint is something that can never be taken away, can never be cured or healed, you'll carry it with you forever. It does have the potential to completely derail a character arc or an entire campaign, because these characters now they'll never be invited to any fancy courts ever again. And so you have to know going into it what to do. Anyway, this adventure talks about how to deal with that and how to incorporate it voluntarily into your campaign, and how to tread lightly around it in other cases. Anyway, like I was saying, I was worried about this, not only because the Shadowlands has the potential to be incredibly destructive, but also because the Shadowlands is kind of empty and there's not a lot of people you can talk to. And the 5th edition of Legend of the Five Rings is an inherently social game. The dice mechanics, the way the skills are designed, combat is a part of it, absolutely, because it is a samurai game. But it is primarily a samurai drama. And what you are trying to do is talk to people and interact with people. And that's kind of what the entire game is based around. I am delighted to report, having read the entire adventure, I haven't actually run anyone through it yet, but I've read it cover to cover a couple of times to make sure I understood everything about it. There's actually a lot of opportunity for interaction, for these same kind of social drama conflicts that make this edition of the game work so well. So for example, when you cross the wall, there's a chance to have some Crab Clan warriors with you. And they are super valuable, not just to, explain some things, but also to kind of show how dangerous the Shadowlands are, because you can redshirt them instead of, forever corrupting the characters. So they can kind of job for the Shadowlands demons in a way that keeps your characters a little safer, at least in the beginning. You don't want to put too much plot armor on the characters, because this is definitely a horror adventure, and they need to be, you use those Crab Clan warriors to establish how dangerous it is, and then you let your characters go, and if they did not take that warning to heart, then absolutely they're going to end up tainted and corrupted and eaten by monsters. But yes, these Crab Clan warriors also have the chance to interact with people. They can talk. They can demonstrate honor when the characters are afraid. They can demonstrate fear when the characters are too brave. They're a really great GM tool. And there are lots of other people to talk to as well, and I'm not going to say who, but there are people before you cross the wall. There are other people after you cross the wall. In fact, there is a free downloadable mini adventure about the Nezumi. The Nezumi are the rat people, kind of humanoid rats that used to live in this area before it became the Shadowlands, and now they still live here, but as nomads, kind of patrolling and staying out of the demon's way and things like that. They're not really accepted on the other side of the wall because they're rats and Rokugan is kind of racist, but they do make a home as kind of noble good guys on the wrong side of the wall, and so there's a chance to interact with them as well, and they get mentioned in Mask of the Oni, but like I said, there is a separate adventure that is free to download, whether you own Mask of the Oni or not. It's just on Fantasy Flight's website, and that incorporates them and gives you more chances to use all of those social skills and other ways to put your duty and your ambition and so on into conflict with each other. So, hooray. Now let's talk about the adventure itself, and I need to be very cagey about this because I don't want to spoil anything. It is... Well, let's talk about the components that come with it first. First of all, there's maps, and this is a big quad fold map that, folds out twice and then turns into this big giant thing. So here is a map of the area. You can see the light part is Rokugan and the darker part is the Shadowlands because it's in shadow. And then the flip side of it is this huge thing. It is no spoiler to say that you are going to be going to a castle on the other side, because that is the entire impetus of the adventure. We need to go to Daylight Castle, which is the old ancestral home of the Hida clan. Hida? No, Hiruma. Hiruma clan, which is a family with Hiruma family, which is inside of the Crab clan. And it was, they had to abandon it when demons attacked, and they fell back and they built the wall, a day or two travel away. And so there's still some valuable stuff there. So in some ways, this is kind of dungeon crawly, or rather, it could be played as a dungeon crawl if your characters like that. And the fact that I have now described it as a dungeon crawl and as having a lot of good social opportunities, I think is a good barometer for you to know that this adventure does have a lot of different stuff. My only two problems with this adventure, I'll say three problems, because one of them is silly. It's called Mask of the Oni. There's no mask at any point in this story. The big demon that you meet doesn't wear a mask. The other bad guys that you confront, no one wears a mask anywhere. I've read through this thing twice. I haven't seen a mask in it, and I don't know what I am missing. I apologize. Somebody please tell me who's wearing a mask. Anyway, okay, my two real problems with this, first of all, is that it is so open-minded, it's so open-ended, that there's a lot of detail that could have and maybe should have been included that is not there. And that's because they are constantly trying to give you the opportunity to sculpt this in any way you want, right? And to some extent, that's really great. I love, especially towards the end of an adventure, because they don't know exactly where your players are going to be and how your players have progressed. There's no railroading anywhere in here. If you do things one way, if you do things a different way, there's lots of different routes you can take to arrive where you need to arrive and end up achieving what you need to achieve. And that's great at the end. But my second, yeah, but it can be difficult, and it is going to be a lot of extra work, I think, on the part of the game master to kind of wrangle this massive open-ended options into a single storyline. I tend to like adventure supplements that have a little more structure than this one does. Like I said, there's a lot of value in having that open-ended aspect to it, but it just means a lot of extra work, and it means that it is more of a toolbox than it is a storyline, and you have to impose your own storyline on top of it. That's not entirely true because there is definitely a story going on, but any arc that that story has, any sense of growth or progress, will be provided by the game master because it is not present in the adventure as published. Now, corollary with that, the second thing that I have is that it doesn't have, I think it glosses over, let's say that, it glosses over far too much, in my opinion, the introduction to the adventure. And that's a very unfair thing of me to say because it actually does talk about introduction quite a bit. Part of the problem is that they have tied this adventure to the little mini adventure that comes in the Game Master kit, which is called Dark Tides. And so they have, a page or two that says, if you have played through Dark Tides, here's what you can do next. And it's actually really, really interesting. There's a lot of cool stuff. There's a solid sense of progress, and here's how we got from A to B to C and then arrived at this adventure. And so bear with me while I explain why that's a bad thing. Then there's also another couple of pages that say, if you haven't played through Dark Tides, then how are you going to get people into this adventure? Through some other means. And then it provides different motivations, and it provides other things like that, all of which basically boil down to the Game Master said we're doing this, and so we're going to do this. I feel like, again, as I said with the story structure, the story introduction is going to require a lot of work from the Game Master to get you there. Which is, and like I said, that's an unfair thing to say because I think most published adventures are like that, right? Here's the adventure that we're doing. Here's why you're doing it. Okay, go. I think the reason that this bothers me as much as it does is because that Dark Tides connection is so good, and it's so interesting, and it is so bare bones. I would have greatly appreciated more. Take Dark Tides. You could have an entire adventure at least this size, if not bigger, leading you from Dark Tides to here as you are tracking basically a particular villain or a particular series of events. There is a lot that can be done, and this book really kind of glosses over all of that instead of saying, here is a fantastic Rokugan spanning investigation story. It takes that, which could have been so cool, and it reduces it to one page of, here's how you can get your people into the adventure. So, let me rephrase everything I've said over the last 5 minutes and say this. The introduction to the adventure is good, provided the Game Master is willing to put in the work to draw the players into it and to make it interesting and awesome and fun. But it could have been expanded. It could have been so much more than it was. At the end of the day, though, that's kind of the way this adventure is designed. So really what I am asking for is for them to have designed it differently, which is not fair. They clearly, one of their design pillars, one of their kind of guiding principles as they created this adventure was that they wanted to cut out all of the downtime and get you straight into the action. There are several pages about what it's like to travel through the Shadowlands, how you can use the environment and monsters and travel and exhaustion and all of these other things to create a sense of horror and dread. But at the same time, the book keeps constantly saying, don't dwell on this too much. The whole point is to get them to the castle so they can explore the castle. And then weirdly, so it gives you all of the tools if you want them to make travel in the Shadowlands really scary and dangerous. But then it says don't do that. Just jump ahead as quick as you can. And then once you get to the castle, there's this huge map, this giant quad-fold map that I showed you, and it is full of interesting things, and it is kind of structured, like I said, as a dungeon crawl. But again, they've glossed over a lot of the really good stuff. So they're maybe a third of the rooms on the map have descriptions, and everything else, there's nothing there. And there's actually a little sidebar, again, that says, it is beyond the scope of this adventure to describe every room and every obstacle and every trap in this castle. No, it is not. It is arguably the entire purpose of this adventure to describe the locations in that castle. That's what the adventure is about. And so they did explain all of the major ones, but if your characters are interested in the dungeon crawl aspects of exploring a Shadowlands castle, you've got to put in about 2/3 of that work to populate all the rest of those rooms. And I won't give specific examples because I don't want to spoil this in case any players are watching. But there are rooms in there that are just incredibly interesting. And I read through the map and I was like, oh my gosh, this castle is going to be amazing. And then you read through the book, and maybe 6 or so of the rooms actually get descriptions. They're the ones that apply to the plot, so the plot is still there, and what is there is fantastic. I don't want that point to be lost. What is in this book is wonderful. What is not in this book makes me weep for what could have been. And so I guess it just comes back to that same idea. If the game master is willing to put in the effort to fill in all of the many, many holes in this adventure, this can be something really incredible. As it is, it's okay. It's fun. It will take you through a good thing. It has opportunities for really impressive horror, but it could be much more comprehensive than it is. And I suppose there's something to be said for leaving a bunch of empty space for the game master to scribble in, but that's not what I buy adventure supplements for. If I am using a published adventure, it's because I want someone else to do that work for me. If I'm going to do all that work, I'm just going to do my own adventure. So, a little disappointing in that regard. Anyway, at the end of the day, Mask of the Oni is a cool story. It is the bones of a cool story on which a good GM can hang a great story. Let's say that. Anyway, Mask of the Oni. Very cool stuff. Oh, you know what else they have? Let's just show you this real quick. All of their adventure supplements come with this kind of token sheet. And some of these, the token sheets are interesting to me because I don't know what they're for. There's nowhere on the, the map of the room, I guess you could, like, there's no grid. You can't have combat on a grid because there's no map. I guess you could bring your own and then use these, but it's not really a miniatures grid kind of combat system. In fact, it is kind of purposefully abstracted to the point that that doesn't matter anymore. Anyway, also, most of the tokens on here don't actually show up in the adventure at any point. They've included lots of Nezumi, which is great. So if you use that extra Nezumi adventure, you've got tokens for them. There's a bunch of little tokens that can be used for the player characters, and they've got a lot of different clans and genders and types and things in here, so you can kind of cover your whole party. And then they've got a bunch of monsters that are actually not included in the storyline at all that you can just throw in if you need. So, like I said, it's weird in that I'm not entirely certain what I would use it for as a game master, but I love the fact that it's there because clearly there are other people who are different than me and who would use this and would get a ton of incredible use out of it. So, hooray for having tokens. And of course, the art is gorgeous, as is all of the art in this entire game line. So, there you go. Mask of the Oni. I do recommend it with the caveat that it is going to require some work on your GM's part. But if you're willing to put in that work, this is going to be a really stellar horror adventure that combines the fantasy and the horror and the samurai stuff all in one thing. And really, that's what we're playing this game for. So, hooray for that. Anyway, that's Mask of the Oni. I think you should check it out. And my name is Dan Wells, and you are awesome. Thanks for watching, and I will see you later. Bye.